Revelation 13 today. Actually, it's going to be the whole day with Revelation 13. First, we're going to look at, we're going to study the two beasts and then the mark of the beast. So this is going to basically cover the whole day. And you know, a lot could have been said about this. Like, the first presentation is going to be, well, Revelation 13, about looking at this beast and fulfillment of these prophecies of today. And, you know, only since Pope Francis took over or became a pope, a lot of things have happened in the world. And I cannot cover everything, you know, that is interesting in relation to Revelation 13 in this short time, but I've chosen some things that has happened. And yeah, let us start with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, I am thankful for another day that you have given to us. I'm thankful that you have a plan for us and that you love us. And Father, I just pray for your Holy Spirit to be present here as we're going to study another important topic. I pray that you may give me the right words and that we may see hope in all this that is going on in the world and in what we are going to study. And pray that Christ may be in the center. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we have two beasts in Revelation 13. We have the beast of the sea, and we have the beast of the earth. And there are many similarities between the first beast. You have this in your handouts also. Unfortunately, we don't have so much time to look at this, but you have it there and you can study for yourself. But there are many similarities between Daniel 7 and Revelation 13, and especially in connection with this first beast. You see that there's a beast arising out of the sea and up from the sea, and then you have these different animals or beasts coming up in in Daniel 7 that you find elements of them in the Revelation 13. And then you have 10 horns, and this time periods, number of a man, eyes of a man, and they do some of the same things in a blasphemy. They make war, yeah, so you can understand, it's quite evident as you do a study, and in particular through, you know, if you study Revelation 7 and then Daniel 7 and Revelation 13, then you will see that these are basically the same. The little horn that is of Daniel 7 and then the first beast of Revelation 13. So let's start by reading verse 1 in Revelation 13. Ilka, would you like to read for us?
And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horn and blasphemous names on its head.
Thank you. So, as I said, you see several similarities here. It's rising up out of the sea. What do we know about the sea that I briefly mentioned earlier? What is that a symbol of? Yes, we see in the Revelation 17, verse 15, it says that the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So it's going to rise up through a populated area. And we see 7 heads and 10 horns. We will not go much into the 7 heads, but I believe that they are kingdoms, following the same time period, the same sequence as we have seen earlier, and then the papacy is one of these heads that will also regain the power. That's a study for Revelation 17 more, but and then you see the 10 horns, again similarity with Daniel 7. And then it was going to be a blaspheming power. It has a blasphemous name. We know that, what is blasphemy? So being in place of God, claiming to be God, you see that in John 10:33. And then you also another biblical description of what blasphemy is, or definition, claiming to forgive sins. You see that in Mark 2:5-7. And they do that. I mean, priests can forgive certain things, and you have the priest as the mediator many times, and Pope claiming to be the vicar of Christ on earth. These are quite big claims, and it is blasphemic. We have some quotes here. Pope John Paul II, "Have no fear when people call me the vicar of Christ, when they say to me, Holy Father, or Your Holiness, or use titles similar to these, which seem even inimical, or which means basically causing harm to the gospel." So, and then we have another one. Well, I have some more quotes later, but it says basically here in The Rise of the Medieval Church, a book from the 1900s, "Out of the ruins of political Rome arose the great moral empire in the giant form of the Roman Church." So this is where it came from. Verse 2, "And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority." So who is the dragon that we talked about? Satan, right? So we see here now he's working through another power. Early in Revelation 12 he worked through which power? Rome, right? Pagan Rome. And now he's working through papal Rome, and he gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. So here you see, basically when John is describing this, he saw the beast like unto a leopard. Starting with the leopard, which kingdom is this in Daniel 7? Greece. And then goes on to, he said he had the feet of a bear. Medo-Persia. And then the mouth of a lion. Babylon. So here he's going backwards in this, in relation to these kingdoms, in relation to Daniel 7, in describing this beast. And Antichrist will sure have characteristics, this power will sure have characteristics of the former kingdoms that we have seen on the scene: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. So the dragon gave the power, as he is working through the kingdoms on this earth, to suit his purposes. So now, instead of working directly through paganism, we know that paganism and Christianity was blended, and then out of all this came the Roman Catholic Church. And now he's working directly, behind the facade of a so-called Christian organization, hoping to be able to fool people and deceive people. And has he been successful with that? Yes, definitely. And he gave, it says, the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Can you get any greater authority than political and religious? Combined. That's a dangerous combination. I mean, you can't really get greater authority than these two combined, as papal Rome has. And what an influence they have now in the world. Pope is on a tour around the world to meet with different leaders of different religions, And almost everywhere he goes, people just love him and they just look up to him. And I believe the world has started to wonder. As we see here in the next verse, verse 3, it says, "And I saw one of his heads," that is one of the seven, that I believe is the papacy, quite obviously, following the same sequence of kingdoms, "as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast." So when did the papacy get their power? Yes, they regained the power then, but when did they get it firsthand? 538. And then continue to what year? 1798. We know that Berthier, the general of Napoleon, entered Rome in February 1798 and proclaimed a republic. Basically then abolished, as it says, the papal government and established a secular one. Now this was, kind of like since the Reformation, the papacy got weaker and weaker. But now this was, the final event in this process that caused the deadly wound that we read about here. And we will see this time, that the 1260 years coming up later in Revelation 13 as well. So the question is, can we see a healing since 1798? Because this is what the prophecy says. There is going to be a healing, and we already got a year here, 1929. This is when temporal power was restored to the Pope, who was given to rule the Vatican City. And since then, there are several things that point to that, yes, the papacy has, the wound is healing. The papacy has gotten more and more influence and power in the world. This small kingdom, can you imagine? Small kingdom of the Vatican, 108 approximately acres. So it's not a big country. The wound has really indeed been healing quite fast. And this phrase, "and the world wonder," can also mean the world was amazed or they admired, following the beast. 2 years ago, I visited Wittenberg. And have anyone of you been there to see that? Yeah? So this is what I saw when I came there. I saw this globe, all the world in the red color, the color of Reformation or Revolution. And it says Reformation, or Reformation 2017, that's when the 500 years of Reformation, or since it took place, since Luther nailed the 95 Theses at the Castle Church, the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg. This is where the Reformation, kind of how we count it, really started. And this is where Luther and Melanchthon used to work together. And all over the city I saw these posters, Luther 2017, 500 years of Reformation. And then it was another one there, it said, you might see it here, I don't know, it's a little bit small letters there, Reformation and, it says in German actually, so Reformation and politics. They have a theme for each year since they came up with this concept, and in 2014 it was Reformation and politics. And I started thinking about Revelation 13 right away. And as you know, I'm sure you know already, but so the Ecumenical movement are planning for a big event next year. And they are really trying to get more and more unified until this year. And I'll get back to this in a moment. But we know that many reformers, Luther, Calvin, Knox, they used to believe, or they believed in their time that the Catholic Church or the Pope is the Antichrist. Now, if you ask a Protestant today, who's the Antichrist? Well, you'll probably get an answer like, I'm not sure. Or at least not the Catholic Church, most of them. So the Protestants are actually right now, or not right now, or since kind of they have gotten more and more back to the Catholic Church, I mean, we are forgetting to protest, basically. We are forgetting what it means to be Protestant. Now, being a Protestant means to, you know, get closer to the Catholic Church and to one another, giving up doctrines for unity, sacrificing everything for unity. And unity, of course, is not bad, but giving up doctrines for unity is not true unity. Because I want to read verse 4.
And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?
All right, so they worship the dragon. In reality, they are actually worshiping Satan, these who are wandering after the beast. That's quite scary because they believe that they're worshiping God, you know? And let me say as yesterday, I mean, I believe there are many sincere and good Catholics and some that will be in heaven one day, but the deception in the end is going to be so big that in the end, unless you know, when everyone will choose following the state and the church or following God and His commandments, then if you don't follow God's commandments, then you will not be in heaven. And that's why we have these messages to take to the world, because it's quite serious, and it's very serious. And since the beginning, it has really been about who do you worship. When you go back, you had Cain and Abel. Both were sacrificing to God, but only one of them were accepted, because only one of them did it God's way. So Cain came with his fruits, right? But that was not the blood sacrifice, and God wanted a blood sacrifice. And Abel did that. He listened to God, but Cain said, I want to worship my way. That's basically what you have today. We want to worship God our way. We're trying to make Him fit into our image rather than letting God change us and transform us back into His image that He is striving and trying to accomplish. And the healing of a wound takes time. So it's not like it's going to happen like boom. But now we have had some time since 1798, and we see indeed a healing more and more and faster I see with the years. You just see the tempo is just going up. Only the last few years back, you just see a lot has happened. And, you know, some of the headlines during the years, like reading this text, I'm going to show you a few headlines here. One of them is, can Pope Francis heal the deep divisions in Christianity? Francis continues to take the world by storm. Pope Francis is only leader respected enough to end today's wars. And you know, I don't know about you, but when I read some of this, I'm thinking about this. Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Because basically what he's doing, he's kind of trying to help out in many conflicts. Cuba, he visited, taking a role as a peace advocate. And let's be friends, guys. You know, between Jews and Muslims also, he was in Israel, the United States and Cuba, the harassments done by ISIS and further on. So he's trying to, you know, so basically when doing that, I mean, can you imagine any country in the world that would dare to go to war against Vatican? I mean, that's quite unlikely because the Pope and Vatican, they are friends with basically everyone so far. I mean, maybe there are a few exceptions that it's not, you know, they're not the best friends, but you see that he is looked up on from many different countries and leaders in the world. And as we know, he was also in the United States last year, and we're going to get back to that later. Pope Francis was invited to the 500 year anniversary of the Reformation. And, well, as you know, he was in Sweden also. But, so the highest representative of German Protestantism, Nikolaus Schneider, he is the chairman of the Council of the Evangelical Church. He met personally with Pope Francis some time back now to invite him to this anniversary next year. And during this meeting, the Pope underlined how important it is for him that we as churches walk together on the path of testifying the faith in this world. And this leader, Schneider, he said the conversations with the Pope and Vatican it really contributed to build trust. And during the 1540s, the Counter-Reformation of the Catholic Church started. It was a response to the Reformation, obviously, but the last decades, this has really changed. One Catholic ecumenical bishop in Germany, Gerhard Feige, he said, one could almost say that the Catholic Church has set out from the path of the Counter-Reformation unto that of the Co-Reformation. I'm just imagining sometimes when I'm seeing things that are going on, what would happen if Luther woke up today? I think he would get a heart attack right away and die. It's just unbelievable what is going on. Like, why in the world? I mean, like, imagine he's invited to the place where we count as the Reformation started, the Pope, by the Protestant churches. I mean, why in the world? What in the world can he do there? And as you know, I saw the Pope at what happened in Sweden is kind of the beginning of this big anniversary celebration. This is what they were talking about all the time. Yeah, we start to celebrate these 500 years. Now that's what happened this year, a few weeks ago, and so we see a reconciliation process between Catholics and Protestants, and so the same man, this Catholic ecumenical officer bishop, he said, I would appreciate if this were not only happening in the leadership of the churches, but everybody must change and get on the move. It remains to be clarified how much unity is necessary. And this was said a few years ago now. I already believe that, more and more members of the churches are getting active and see that, yes, we need to unify. So right now, I think this has even been taken to where he was wishing it would take. Have you heard about the Luther Garden in Wittenberg? This is quite interesting. It's basically created by a global ecumenical network. So when I visited Wittenberg, we didn't have so good time, but I wanted to see certain places, and this was one of the places I wanted to see, because at this place, they aim to plant 500 trees until next year. One tree, I mean, basically, if you're a church, wherever you are in the world, you can say, I want to plant a tree there. And of course, probably you need to apply and stuff. So there are churches represented from all over the world in this garden as a sign that, we want to come together, right? That's the purpose. This is arranged by the Lutheran World Foundation and United Evangelical Lutheran Church of Germany. So, obviously symbolizing one tree for each year of the Reformation. And in the middle of this garden, we find what is called the Luther rose. That is kind of the symbol of the Lutheran Church and Luther's theology and his faith. And here are 5 trees. And from there are 7 paths that is symbolically leading out to the world. And creating this global ecumenical network. And this is very interesting. Can someone guess which tree? All of the trees have numbers. Which tree is number 1, do you think? And in the middle, in the center of everything, one guess. The Catholic Church, yes. I mean, unbelievable. Well, now it is actually quite believable seeing what is happening in the world, but so I had bad time, as I said, when I was here, but I was running around because I wanted to see which churches are here. Ran to every tree, back and forth, and trying to find them. So number 1, the Catholic Church. Number 2, the Orthodox Church. Number 3, the Anglican Communion, and then World Alliance of Reformed Churches, Methodist Council, and on. And I saw churches from so many different countries. And one responsible for concept and design of this garden, he said, in a movie on their website, he said, I hope this garden will one day grow into a park a park in which people can gather under the trees, a park that grows together, just as our Christian world religion should grow together one day. So, this is the purpose. And this is a very good, symbol of what is taking place and what they want to take place in the world, and what prophecy has predicted 2,000 years ago. So this is really, showing how many churches are really open to this idea. Let's come together, Let's put aside our differences and get unified. John chapter 17, they can quote the words of Jesus of being one, but this is a false unity. And unity is not bad. God wants His church to unify. As we talked about earlier, unity is something that needs to take place before the latter rain. We need unity, but we are not to give up our faith and doctrines for that unity. And God will gather His people in His church in the end. Now, how many of you have heard about the document called From Conflict to Communion? Yeah? You have heard about that? I'm just going to read a few statements from here because this is an attempt to unity between Catholics and Lutherans. It has been going on now for some time. And how they have a strategy there, how they successfully should unite. And as we know, the next year, or basically in 1999, a joint declaration on the doctrine of justification were signed by the Catholic Church and the Lutheran Church to narrow the theological divide of the different faiths. And next year will mark not only the 500 years Reformation anniversary, but 50 years of cooperation between the Lutheran and the Catholic Church. So it's a big year for them. So a few quotes from here. It says, "The awareness is dawning on Lutherans and Catholics that the struggle of the 16th century is over. The reasons for mutually condemning each other's faith have fallen by the wayside. Thus, Lutherans and Catholics identify 5 imperatives as they commemorate 2017 together. In 2017, we must confess openly that we have been guilty before Christ of damaging the unity of the Church. This commemorative year presents us with 2 challenges: the purification and healing of memories, and the restoration of Christian unity in accordance with the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ." And then they invite all Christians to be part of this. And I have not read the whole, well, it's basically a booklet or a small book, but I read parts of it. And so can you believe that this is happening? And basically this, you can see that some of the things they're talking about in this document, putting aside differences. Now in Lund, they actually, as you know, the Pope came there, and they began this commemoration of the 500 years. And it was a joint ecumenical commemoration, and I saw leaders from different parts of the world there, like religious leaders. You had, during this meeting, here is the Pope outside the Dome Church, where he and the leader of the Lutheran World Foundation signed a document, basically a joint statement that the Catholics and Lutherans, it says, pledged to pursue their dialogue in order to remove the remaining obstacles that hinder them from reaching full unity. So, and can you imagine that when, the church with the very name of Luther have now signed, well, they've already signed other things, but they are signing agreements with the papacy, but the church which Luther believed was the Antichrist. This is not a small thing. This is really, prophecy is really fulfilling. Let's continue to read here, verse 5 and 6. Jimmy would like to read that for us.
"The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months.
And verse 6.
He opened his mouth to blaspheme God, and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven."
All right. So, as we see now, this is a blasphemous power. He was given authority to continue for 42 months, which is how many prophetic years, or, well, 1260 days, and that is 1260 years. So this is the period we see in both Daniel and Revelation multiple times, the period of the persecution that ended in 1798. He is speaking great things and blasphemous. And again, he was given authority by the dragon, right, to do this for 42 months. And then here comes something interesting here. He was not only going to blaspheme his name, but his tabernacle. His tabernacle, it says here, and those who dwell in heaven. We know, I've told you about it before, I have a presentation called The Truth Cast Down But Restored. I can give you the link later on. But here I share how basically, because he was going to blaspheme the tabernacle, so basically the things we find in the sanctuary, I believe this is what was cast down in Daniel 8. And then you see how God restored all these things, all these truths that were cast down. Now, basically this power is trying to set up in place of preaching the truth and the sanctuary, God's way, God's plan of salvation. He's setting up his own temple here on earth, a physical temple with their own rules, their traditions. That's the way of salvation, in place of what we have in the heavenly sanctuary. So this is not a small thing. Casting down the different truths. The Bible, and putting tradition above it, claiming to forgive sins. You need to do certain work to get saved. So they're basically setting up their own sanctuary. God, their own rules for salvation, and thus they draw the attention of the people away from the heavenly sanctuary, where what we should really behold now, because this is where Jesus is, and He's cleansing it from our sins. Now, a few statements here. Let's see here. I don't have all of them there. Cardinal Sarto, who became Pope Pius X, said this: "The Pope is not only the representative of Jesus Christ, but he is Jesus Christ himself, hidden under a veil of the flesh. Does the Pope speak? It is Jesus Christ who speaks." I mean, that's a clear statement, isn't it? And he's saying it's not only that he is the representative, but he is Jesus Christ. And this anti-Christian power, as he says here in the next quote, robbed the church of its gospel light and plunged the world into the dark ages. 1,000 years covers the crest of the persecutions, when from 50 million to 150 million martyrs died of the sword, at the stake, in dungeons, and of starvation because of the confiscation of their earthly possessions. Well, this is during the dark ages, obviously. And then we read that he is going to blaspheme also those who dwell in heaven. Now, what does that mean? Well, listen to this quote. We know that he blasphemed against God and Christ. But listen to this, because we know that not only God is in heaven, but His angels are there. It says, "Indeed, the excellence and power of the Roman pontiff is not only in the sphere of heavenly things, earthly things, and those of the lower regions, but even above the angels, than whom he himself is greater." So, this is indeed a power that is claiming to be above everyone else in this universe. Verse 7 and 8. Let's see here. It says, "It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." There is a few exceptions here. Earlier it said, "All the world marvel and follow the beast." But then, obviously, there is an exception, and there are those names who have been written in the book of life. of the Lamb, slain from the foundations of the world. Now, this time of period with 1260 years of persecution is a foretaste for what will take place again, even worse in the future of persecution. So basically, there will be two groups in the end, right? And if we want to be in the group of the Lamb, belonging to the Lamb, Jesus Christ, then we need to watch, we need to pray, we need to work, as Anna says, is the Christian watchword, and get prepared and help prepare others. And I know that that's why you're here at AFCO, and I'm glad for that. The Book of Life, well, what about that? Do we know anything about the book? Is there a Book of Life, as we see here? You remember Moses in Exodus? Let's see here. I don't have that here. But in Exodus 32 to 33, it says, "Yet now if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book which thou hast written. And the Lord said unto Moses, Whosoever hath sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book." So you see Moses here, really humble, you know. If you cannot forgive their sin, then blot my name out. I mean, that's not something small. Quite a different spirit here than what we see in some of these boastful expressions from popes that we have read. So there is a book, the Book of Life. And we also read that he was slain from the foundation of the world. 1 Peter 1, 19 to 20. It says, "But with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot, who verily was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you." So it was decided before he created the world, the plan of salvation. The plan of salvation was set and planned. And now, in verse 9 we read this, "If anyone has an ear, let him hear." And when you read that, do you think there's coming something important after that? Let's see what it says. "He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with a sword must be killed with a sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints." So what is this referring to? What is this talking about? Yeah, so basically the papacy have been leading into captivity. He has been doing his persecution, and now it is his turn to go into captivity. Now it's his turn to be killed with the sword. We know 1798, that's when they got their deadly wound. And also we know that finally the destiny of the beast, he will be taken and cast into the lake of fire. So I guess it's referring to that too, but we know here, talking about the 42 months, so we're talking about that now this power was taken into captivity and got its deadly wound. And Jesus warned for this, Matthew 26:52. Then said Jesus unto him, "Put up again thy sword into his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword." And this we see clearly of the Catholic Church, and what finally will happen to this beast from the sea. And here's the patience and faith of the saints. This Greek word here implies an active endurance. And in Romans 5:3 it says, "And not only so, but we glory in tribulations, also knowing that tribulation works patience." So this is what God's people have been gaining through this time of persecution. Those who are faithful, it really gave them patience. Something important that we need in the end, that we need to develop a good character. We need patience. So this is specifically mentioned. Now, what time frame are we in here now? We just saw if anyone has an ear, let him hear. Okay, something important is happening. And then, okay, now the papacy was taken into captivity. So what time frame are we in here now, again? 1798, okay. And then this next thing is happening. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. So then we have a clue, okay. In the midst of all this taking place with this first beast, then we have another beast rising up. And I told you briefly, but I will tell you again. Contrary to the first beast, this second beast is coming up from where? From the earth. So if the sea is representing a populated place, what do you think earth would, I mean, what would that be representing? An area where you don't have really a lot of people, right? And remember that we read in chapter 12, verse 16, the earth helped the woman. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. So then we want to look at a place that was indeed helping the church. And we know during this time of great persecution, they were fleeing to an unpopulated area. The Protestants were hunted down. Many were killed, as we saw, 50 to 150 million. So many were fleeing to United States. And this is actually interesting. The word coming up out of the earth in Revelation 13, verse 11, this word is also used for growing plants. So something, growing up, a process of development. For instance, in the beginning of the 1630s, 20,000 Puritans fled from England to the United States. You have the Salzburgers, Lutherans, fled from Austria. After Catholic Archbishop expelled 20,000 Lutherans. In the 7th century, also 400,000 French Protestants immigrated to the various parts of the world, including North America. So the earth indeed helped the woman, like quite clearly. What is quite interesting now, before we, let's see here, I think I'm going to tell you this first. Basically, do you remember when the United States got their independence? 1776, around this same time, in the time frame we're reading in. And they voted their constitution in 1787. They adopted the Bill of Rights in 1791 and was clearly recognized as a world power by this time, 1798. So it was growing up like a plant. It was as a result of a process. And here is from a book called The New World Compared with the Old by G.A. Townsend. Like a silent seed, we grew into empire. Almost as if he would have understood this prophecy, what it really meant, coming up, growing up like a plant. Now, we see here it was going to have 2 horns like a lamb. What is a lamb a symbol of? Jesus Christ. So you think it would be a Christian nation? Exactly like the United States indeed is. And then we have the 2 horns. What are they symbolizing? Well, we have 2 fundamental principles, republicanism and Protestantism, civil and religious liberty. Ellen White, she helps us to explain this in the Bible commentary. You have the reference there, 7 BC, 975. Here is a striking figure of the rise and growth of our own nation. And the lamb-like horns emblems of innocence and gentleness well represent the character of our government as expressed in its two foundational principles, republicanism and Protestantism. And then she says in Great Controversy 441, the lamb-like horn indicate youth, innocence, and gentleness, fitly representing the character of the United States when presented to the prophet as coming up. So, but it was gonna speak like a dragon. You know, you're just gonna get some dragon talk from over there. And when Donald Trump was chosen, I was wondering, we'll get some more dragon talk now, maybe. I mean, seeing what he has been saying so far about certain things, I'm thinking, I was always thinking, oh, if this man gets president, then if he really continues with what he has been saying, then things are gonna wrap up. Could even do quite quick. And let me share a few things. Before the 2016 election, Donald Trump appears in a video addressing Catholics. And he said this, Catholics are an important part of the American story. America has been strengthened by hard-working Catholics from New York to California. The Catholic story is truly unique, and it's a great story. You know, it doesn't seem like, you know, we have just seen what the Catholics were doing, right? I mean, how can he really say the Catholic story is truly unique and it's a great story? Great story, hunting down and killing between 50 and 150 million Protestants. Yeah, an important part of the American story. Well, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know what he's even referring to here. What part of the story is actually great? Well, I'm sure some Catholics have been doing some good things. But still, looking at the story, that's the real story. So despite many, of course, well-meaning Catholics and that have been doing many good things, they have a dark history that Trump doesn't seem to recognize. And then he said this in the video, my administration will stay side by side with American Catholics to promote the values we all share as Christians and Americans. The Protestants fled to the United States to find a place of freedom, away from the beast, away from the persecuting power. So, and some other stuff that has been going on. The Constitution right now in America guarantees freedom, but we see some changes and some laws coming up that seem to take the country in a different direction. This summer, not the United States, but in Russia, maybe you heard this, that new religious laws in Russia is actually restricting evangelism. So with other words, according to those laws, I don't think we could do what we are doing now legally in Russia. At least they're restricting evangelism to church buildings. So you cannot really share your faith in private homes or online. But however, the Catholic Church, it doesn't seem to be able to be applied to them to that degree. Of course, the Russian Orthodox Church, they're still free, obviously. But and then the Catholic Church doesn't seem to get that affected either, according to this this article by the Catholics themselves. Putin announced, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, announced that after youth elections, that he wants cooperation with America. He says, basically, it's not our fault that we don't have good relations, but we're ready to work out cooperation. So I'm just thinking, what happened in Russia? I mean, who will be the next country? There are some other countries also where this is restricted, but I'm wondering if I think this is what we see in Russia there. This is what is going to happen soon in the world. And imagine that. So until then, I mean, we need to do what we can until this gets restricted, because then this is going to become hard. Now we can thank God for the freedom we have, so we can live as free human beings, but also share the gospel. Verse 12. Let's see. Selina, would you like to read that?
And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast.
Okay, so this second beast, United States, are going to exercise all the authority of the first beast, the Catholic Church, and cause the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, the Catholic Church, that whose deadly wound was healed. So this is the next thing that will, this is what we will see next that is prophesied, and this is where we're heading, really. And I'll share some more interesting things later, maybe in the next class after a break. But the United States will exercise the religious and political power of the Vatican, the papacy. And this will obviously mean that they have to reverse their present policies guaranteeing full freedom. And when will this cooperation be complete? It says here in Testimonies, Volume 5, page 451. By the decree enforcing the institution of the papacy in violation of the law of God, our nation will disconnect herself fully from righteousness. When Protestantism shall stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of the Roman power, then she shall reach over the abyss to clasp the hands with spiritualism. When under the influence of this threefold union, our country shall repudiate every principle of its constitution as a Protestant and Republican government, and shall make provision for the propagation of papal falsehoods and delusions, then we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan and that the end is near. This is where we're heading now. And you see the hands are being reached both from the Vatican to the United States and opposite, as this quote is talking about.